My classmate mocked me for being poor, but now they work for the successful business I built and depend on me to succeed. Very exciting story. Back in high school, I was that kid. You know, the one who wore the same sneakers every year until they basically fell apart, brought packed lunches while everyone else hit the cafeteria, and prayed no one would notice my hand-me-downs. Yeah, that was me. And let me tell you, kids can be brutal. But one classmate, he didn't just laugh at me, he made my life hell. Fast forward to today, though, and guess who just applied for a job at my company? Yep, the tables have turned, and the story behind it is pretty wild. Let me break it all down for you. Part 1. The Golden Boy of High School. So, let me set the scene. High school. Everyone's trying to fit in, figure out who they are, all that cliché teenage drama. But in my case, fitting in wasn't even an option. My family was barely scraping by. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. And my dad, well, let's just say he wasn't in the picture. Meanwhile, there was him. Let's call him Jake. Jake was that guy. You know the type, athletic, popular, had a new outfit every other week, and drove a car to school while the rest of us were still begging our parents for rides. He wasn't just popular, he was untouchable. Teachers loved him, girls loved him, and guys wanted to be him. At first, I didn't think Jake even knew I existed. Why would he? I was the quiet kid in the back of the class, always trying to disappear into my hoodie. But one day, that changed. Jake noticed me, but not in a good way. It started small, like the kind of stuff you'd shrug off. A snide comment about my shoes here, a fake cough with poor mumbled into it there. Harmless, right? Except it didn't stop there. Jake realized he got laughs whenever he picked on me. That's when things escalated. Every lunch period, he'd find a new way to humiliate me. Spilling milk on my tray by accident, pretending to trip me in the hall. Once, he even held up one of my notebooks and said, "Dude, what century is this from? Did your grandma write this?" Cue laughter from the peanut gallery. At the time, I didn't fight back. What could I do? Jake was practically a celebrity and I was just the poor kid. Part 2. The breaking point. One day, Jake took things too far. It was right before the holidays, and the school had this gift exchange thing. Nothing fancy, just a secret Santa with a $10 limit. My mom scraped together enough for me to participate because she didn't want me feeling left out. I ended up drawing this girl, Sarah, who was really into art. I got her a small sketchbook and a set of colored pencils. It wasn't much, but I thought it was thoughtful. When it was time to exchange gifts, everyone was buzzing with excitement. I handed Sarah her gift, and she seemed genuinely happy. Then it was my turn. Jake had drawn my name. I already had a bad feeling, but I wasn't prepared for what happened next. Jake handed me a wrapped box with this smug grin, and the whole table got quiet. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was a pair of old beat-up shoes. Like they were dirty and falling apart. And on the top, he'd written in marker, "For when yours finally give out." The whole table burst out laughing. I could feel my face burning, and for a second, I thought I might cry, but I didn't. I just quietly closed the box and walked out of the cafeteria. That moment stuck with me. It wasn't just embarrassing. It was like Jake wanted to make sure I knew my place. Part 3. Planting the seed. After that Secret Santa incident, something changed in me. Don't get me wrong, I was still embarrassed and angry, but that moment lit a fire. I couldn't let Jake or anyone else define me by where I came from. Around this time, I started thinking about my future more seriously. While everyone else was talking about parties and prom, I was researching how to make money online. I'd heard about people flipping things like sneakers or gadgets, so I figured, why not try? I started small. I went to thrift stores and yard sales looking for anything I could resell. Old electronics, books, even clothes. My first sale was a used game controller I bought for $2 and sold online for $15. It wasn't much, but it felt like I'd won the lottery. After that, I was hooked. I spent every free moment learning how to find deals and make better listings. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even my mom. It was like my little secret, and honestly, it felt good to have something that was mine. Meanwhile, Jake was still being Jake. He didn't notice I was slowly putting pieces of a bigger plan together. He was too busy living his golden boy life. Part 4, Small Wins, Big Lessons. It didn't take long for my side hustle to start picking up. By the time I turned 16, I was making a couple $100 a month. Nothing crazy. But for someone who used to scrounge for lunch money, it felt like a fortune. I started reinvesting everything I made. If I sold a pair of used sneakers, I'd put the profit toward buying better ones. I learned how to clean and restore shoes, making them look almost brand new. Pretty soon, I had regular customers online who trusted me for good deals. It wasn't just about the money, though. I was learning skills I didn't even realize I'd need later: how to market myself, negotiate, and manage my time. And all the while, I was keeping my grades up because, let's face it, my mom wasn't going to let me slack on school. Of course, Jake was still in the picture, throwing his usual jabs. He even noticed one day that I had a slightly nicer pair of shoes. "Wow, you upgrade to clearance rack specials?" he sneered. I didn't even respond. Why would I? I was starting to realize Jake's opinion didn't matter as much as I thought it did. While he was busy clowning me, I was quietly building something for myself. Part 5. The Leap of Faith. By senior year, I was earning enough that I started thinking bigger. Up until that point, I'd stuck to small-time flipping, local deals, a few online sales here and there, but I kept hearing about people who turned this kind of hustle into full-on businesses. I decided to go for it. I saved up enough to buy a bulk lot of used sneakers from a supplier I found online. It was a risk because it was the most money I'd ever spent at once, nearly $1,000. I was terrified I'd made a mistake. When the shipment arrived, I got to work. I cleaned, polished, and photographed every single pair, making them look as good as possible. Then I listed them online and waited. Within a week, I'd sold half of them. By the end of the month, I'd made back my investment and doubled my money. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It could actually be something real. Around this time, Jake started paying attention. I'd upgraded from my beat-up shoes to some fresh kicks, and people noticed. "Oh, look at you, Mr. Fancy Shoes now," Jake said one day, dripping with sarcasm. I just smiled and kept walking. He didn't know that those shoes were just the tip of the iceberg. Part 6. Graduation and Goodbye. By the time graduation rolled around, I was in a completely different place than when high school started. I wasn't rich or anything, but I had a steady income, a growing online store, and, most importantly, a sense of purpose. Jake, on the other hand, was still the same. He threw this massive graduation party, invited basically the whole school, and made sure everyone knew about it. I didn't go, obviously. I wasn't exactly on his VIP list, but a week after graduation, something funny happened. Jake posted on social media about how he was taking a gap year to figure things out. Translation: he didn't get into the colleges he bragged about all year. And meanwhile, I was already laying the groundwork for my next move. Instead of heading straight to college, I decided to take my business full-time. It was a tough choice, especially since my mom really wanted me to go to school, but I felt like I had momentum I couldn't ignore. So, while my classmates were off posting dorm selfies and tagging their new roommates, I was setting up my first official business website. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Jake, he was busy posting throwback pics from high school, clinging to the glory days. It was like he'd peaked already, while I was just getting started. Part 7. The Grind Pays Off. The first year out of high school was a grind. I worked 12-hour days, flipping sneakers and slowly expanding my business. I learned everything I could about e-commerce, marketing, and branding. I even started building relationships with suppliers who could get me exclusive deals. It wasn't easy, though. There were weeks where sales were slow, and I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake by skipping college. But every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of how far I'd come and how much further I wanted to go. By the end of that year, I was making enough to help my mom with bills. For the first time ever, we didn't have to worry about whether the rent would be late. That feeling, and it was better than any paycheck. Then, one day, I got an idea. Why stop at sneakers? I started adding more products to my store: streetwear, accessories, even vintage stuff. Each new category brought in more customers, and my business started growing faster than I expected. Around this time, I started hiring help. Nothing big, just a couple of part-timers to pack orders and handle customer service. It was surreal, realizing I'd gone from being the poor kid everyone overlooked to being someone who could actually give others a job. But the craziest part, Jake wasn't out of the picture yet. Part 8. A Familiar Name. It was about 2 years after high school when Jake popped back into my life in the most unexpected way. By then, my business was thriving. I'd moved into a small warehouse, hired a few more employees, and even launched my own brand of sneakers. Things were looking up. One day I was going through job applications for a new assistant position. Most of the resumes were standard stuff. But then I saw a name that stopped me cold: Jake Anderson. At first I thought, no way, it can't be that Jake. But as I skimmed the resume, it all lined up. The same high school, the same sports achievements he used to brag about, even the same cocky tone in his cover letter. I couldn't believe it. The guy who used to mock me for being poor was now asking me for a job. Part of me wanted to toss his application in the trash right then and there, but another part of me, let's call it the petty side, wanted to see how this would play out. So I decided to call him in for an interview. Part 9. The Interview. The day of the interview was surreal. Jake walked into my office, and for a second, I thought he didn't recognize me. I mean, why would he? Back in high school, I was invisible, just another face in the crowd he could mock. But then I saw it click. His eyes widened just a bit, and his confident smile faltered. "Oh, hey," he said, trying to play it cool. "It's, been a while?" "Yeah, it has," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Inside, though, I couldn't help but feel a little smug. We got into the interview, and honestly, it was clear Jake was struggling. He'd spent his gap year bouncing between part-time jobs and had no real experience. His resume was padded with vague buzzwords like team player and fast learner, but there wasn't much substance behind it. The whole time I could see him squirming, probably realizing that the roles had reversed. Here he was, the guy who once humiliated me in front of our classmates, sitting across from me, hoping I'd give him a shot. At the end of the interview, he said something that really stuck with me. "I know I don't have a lot of experience, but I'm willing to work hard. I just need a chance." Part of me wanted to laugh in his face, but another part of me, well, it felt something else. Part 10. The Decision. After the interview, I sat there for a while staring at Jake's application. I couldn't deny it. There was a part of me that wanted to turn him down, just to give him a taste of what he'd put me through. But then I thought about how far I'd come. Did I really want to stoop to his level? I decided to give him the job. Not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to be the bigger person. And honestly, I was curious to see if he'd take it seriously. Jake started the next week, and it was awkward at first. He clearly wasn't used to taking orders from someone like me, someone he used to look down on. But I laid out the rules, treated him like any other employee, and made it clear I wasn't going to tolerate any nonsense. To my surprise, Jake actually worked hard. He wasn't amazing or anything, but he showed up on time, did what was asked, and kept his head down. Over time, he started to loosen up a bit. One day, during a quiet moment in the warehouse, he said, "You know, I was a real jerk back in high school. I guess I thought being cool meant tearing other people down." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was close enough. I nodded and said, "Yeah, you were. But people change." That was it. No dramatic reconciliation, no big emotional moment. Just two guys acknowledging the past and moving on. Looking back, that whole experience taught me something important. Success isn't about proving people wrong or getting revenge. It's about proving something to yourself. Jake might have made my life miserable in high school, but if I'd let that bitterness define me, I wouldn't be where I am today. So if you're dealing with people like Jake, whether it's bullies, doubters, or haters, don't let them drag you down. Use their negativity as fuel, but focus on your own growth. And hey, if you like this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below about a time you overcame a challenge. I'd love to hear your stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.